Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. It is International Happiness Day today. You may have plenty to be happy about, but an annual report finds younger people, especially in Canada, are not feeling the joy. We'll look into why. In our second half, spring cleaning. Are you getting ready to declutter your space? Why do you do it? And what are you going to do with that stuff you don't want? I'm Dan Burwood, in for Michelle Elliott all this week. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on the CBC News app, as well as our website, cbc.ca/BC, and on YouTube on the CBC Vancouver page. We're going to get to the World Happiness Report in just a moment. We'd love to hear your calls and emails on that. Get them in now. But first, BC's plans to become an even bigger player in electric vehicles has taken another step today. Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation Minister Josie Osborne joined Environment Minister George Heyman this morning to announce $30 million in new money to add 500 public charging stations across the province. That's on top of the 5,000 the government says are already installed. Here's Josie Osborne.
We're helping to reduce range anxiety by prioritizing these new stations to fill geographic gaps that we have in the network. And we're going to have a particular focus on rural, northern, and First Nation communities. We want every community in BC to have access to fast charging infrastructure. So we'll prioritize applications for locations that are also highly publicly accessible, places where people gather, like community and recreation centers, libraries, highway rest stops, and park and ride stations.
For more on this announcement, we're joined by Margareta Dovgal. She is an energy and climate analyst, and she's joining us live. Appreciate your time, Margareta. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here. Good morning.
First off, where is BC in terms of readiness for electric vehicles?
Well, I think the minister's comments certainly spoke to where the priorities should be as far as increasing access. But the reality is we have a very vast geography. There's a lot of landmass to cover, and British Columbians go about their business all over the province. Most of our population, of course, is really close to the border with the United States. There's a bit of concentration in the Lower Mainland and on Vancouver Island, but people need to get everywhere, goods need to get everywhere. So ensuring that this infrastructure is in place so that those with electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles can charge up as needed is really quite important. And they're actually expecting to have about 900,000 electric vehicles on the road in the next decade. There's a commitment right now to have 90% of all new cars sold in BC by the year 2030 to be 90% electric, which is a pretty big step to take. 100% by 2035. We need the infrastructure to support people's movement. And like you said, 500 stations adding to about 1,000. There's also a big focus right now on ensuring that there's supercharger stations being installed too. So you're not waiting for hours to have your car charge up, but you can actually get on your way pretty quickly. So big step forward, certainly for BC.
And just to clarify a point with you, this announcement came on top of the government saying there are already 5,000 charging stations in the province. Is that your understanding?
That's correct, yes.
Yes. And where are most of those concentrated?
A lot of them are where you expect the population to be. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a bit more of a focus on recognizing the accessibility and transportation needs of the rest of the province, which I think is positive. I've heard there's some on major highways going into the interior and a little bit further up north, but generally speaking, it's where the users are. And most of the users right now, people are buying where they feel like they can drive. It's in the cities, particularly in the Lower Mainland.
Now, this announcement this morning essentially adds about 10% more charging stations to BC's grid. Is there a point at which we need to get, like, how many charging stations, if it's going to be 900,000 EVs in the next decade, how many charging stations do you think we need down the road, and when?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I think it depends on ultimately what kind of stations you're building, where the uptake in the population actually is. The policy pressure is there. I think actually the more important question is how are we going to power all of these stations? So getting the charging is really important. It's a critical part of that infrastructure. I think the bigger issue is a little bit further upstream. Last year, we imported about 20% of our electricity here in BC from other places. We use mostly hydroelectric when we generate it here in British Columbia, but it is quite a challenge. So I'm a little bit more worried about that piece. I feel like the charging infrastructure is going to come into place as needed.
How do you balance off those concerns, particularly when, as you mentioned, we had to import power for, I think, one of the first times in decades. We're used to having hydro with large hydroelectric dams, as you said, and big reservoirs. What happens when those just keep dropping?
Yeah, well, drought conditions like we're experiencing right now certainly can do that. Last year, at this point of the year, we already were seeing that there were drought conditions, and of course, it led to that record historic increase in imports and reliance. Ultimately, it's about our ability to be self-sufficient. Other jurisdictions are going through the exact same electrification challenges and opportunities right now as we are, so they're also increasing their demand and need for these sources of clean electricity. So yeah, it's a real challenge to resolve, and I think as we're looking at the precipitation levels, the water levels, very likely we're going to be in a similar situation. The BC government has said that they are investing a lot more in generating. There's a call for power coming shortly, and that's going to actually hopefully bring a lot more capacity to the grid. But I'm hearing only an additional 5% for the next one. We need to essentially double our current electrical capacity in the next couple of decades so that we can actually meet our climate targets. So that's not a cheap thing to do. That's not an easy thing to do. And there's a lot of hoops to jump through because it's not just government doing it, but it actually has to set competitive conditions for the private sector to come in and invest. So challenges across the board. You know, it's getting the electricity to people, it's ensuring people can charge it, it's ensuring users of electric vehicles and other types of technologies like that can actually get those things affordably. So lots of different pieces that need to slot into place so that we can be part of this move forward with climate action.
Lastly, and I appreciate your time, speaking of affordability, electric vehicles, many of them are still quite expensive despite some relatively generous provincial and federal rebates. Where do you think BC and perhaps more broadly Canada needs to go with? Is it more rebates? Is it more innovation so that more people can afford these cars?
Yeah, I think innovation is actually the to focus on here. So the BC government is correctly identifying that your average user of an electric vehicle will see about $1,800 of fuel savings in a year. But of course, the purchase price is quite high, and not everyone can afford it. Having subsidies in place is a really good way to do that, but you can't subsidize the whole path to transportation electrification. There needs to be work on the actual pieces of technology that we're using, ensuring that they can be manufactured in a way that's both affordable and sustainable. It can be supplied to consumers. But a lot of countries right now are asking this question, who's paying the price? And ultimately, it's all of us. Whether government is subsidizing it, you as a taxpayer are paying for that, or you're paying out of it from your own family's wallet. So it's a real question, but I think the reality is clear that we do need to transition. It's a costly process, but it's a price that we need to pay so that we can avoid having to incur greater expenses. It's just a responsibility right now of government to ensure that there's the necessary amount of electricity to support this, the necessary fiscal resources, and the necessary focus on competitiveness. So we can actually incentivize the private sector to do its part and have lots of competition. So at the end of the day, consumers can pay less.
Margareta Dove-Gal, energy and climate analyst. We appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dan.
It is 1:14 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're listening and watching to BC Today. Coming up, are you happy? We're talking about the World Happiness Report today, and we want to hear from you. What makes you happy? What are the barriers to happiness for you? How do you measure happiness? Give us a call right now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. Please be pulled over or hands-free. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. First, our Michelle Gomez spoke with people on the streets of Vancouver about how the blooming cherry blossoms are bringing them some joy.
I love the color. I love it against the blue sky. And yeah, it's joyful.
I think it just adds a lot of color, especially after the rainy season, and just feels like excitement.
Well, I think everyone's just excited that spring's finally on the doorstep here, and yeah, excited for the outdoors and getting into summer.
It's nice to want to be outside,
They just look fragile, floating up there with a blue background. I love that. When my mom was alive, I used to drive through the neighborhoods to show her. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a nice memory.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. She loved it. She was from Alberta, so they don't have that there, Not the same that we do.
They're magnificent. Yeah.
What do you love about them?
Oh, they're colorful and dynamic.
I love this time. It's the best time in the year.
What do you think?
He likes them. He likes to eat them.
It's like magic. I have pictures a lot. I never tired about to take pictures. Yeah, I live here in the neighborhood. It's fantastic.
Happy International Day of Happiness to all of you. There, I got it right. Along with that comes an annual list. A report looks at 143 countries and territories and asks people to evaluate their lives on a scale of 0 to 10. This year, researchers focused on the happiness of people at different stages of their lives. Scandinavian countries continue to lead the world in happiness. Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden are all at the top. When it comes to younger people, though, Canada and the U.S. are noticeably sliding on the scale of happiness. The report says, quote, in North America, happiness has fallen so sharply for the young that they are now less happy than the old. Canada ranked 15th, down from 13th last year. The U.S., meanwhile, dropped from 15th in 2023 to 23rd this year. We want to hear from you now. How happy are you? What makes you happy? How do you measure it? If you're not happy, what is getting in the way? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. Please be pulled over, hands-free. You can text us, 236-330-2623, and email bctoday@cbc.ca. John Helliwell is the co-editor of the World Happiness Report and a professor emeritus at UBC School of Economics, and he joins us now. John, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
First, John, briefly, what are the big findings from this year's report?
The big findings are ones where Canada is implicated, and we're still trying to understand them. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing is some countries are happier for the young than the old, mm-hmm. and have grown in that happiness. Some other are happier for the old for the young, and that includes Canada and the United States. And that's something new within the last 10 years, so that Canada's ranking among the old, over 60s, not old, but over 60, is 8th, and we're up in the about 60th for the young, and that's a big drop in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. We find it's restricted mainly to Canada, the United States, and slightly lesser extent to Australia and New Zealand. We've been investigating within Canada and find out it's largely happening in English-speaking Canada. So in Quebec, the drop is only half as great. We're still trying to dig in to find out because their lives haven't changed very much, what aspect of the news is bothering people in that age group.
Before we get into perhaps more of the why, what are some of the specific questions that people are asked to answer?
The same as the one you mentioned. Only one question is central to the rankings, and that is, think of your life as a whole as a ladder, with the best possible life as a 10 and the worst as a 0. How would you rate your life today? People under 30 in Canada over the last 10 years give an answer that's almost a full point lower than it was a dozen years ago on a scale of 0 to 10.
Why did you decide to break it down by age this year? And is this the first time you've done that?
Well, we looked at happiness by age and gender quite specifically in a special chapter in 2015, but this is the first time we've done it for the whole report, and we had a special chapter on happiness of the young, another on happiness of the old in India, first Indian chapter, and another chapter invited on dementia and happiness and the extent to which happiness can avert and affect the progress of dementia.
And you talked about North America and Canada and the U.S., Australia, New Zealand perhaps being outliers for this drop in happiness among the young. At which point are you able to get into perhaps the why? When does that factor in?
Well, we waited until we found it first. It's a recent finding, and now we're offering it out to the general public and researchers as to why should this drop, really considerable drop in in perceived life evaluations happening only in one part of the world and only in the last 10 years. Something's going on in the social media or other media that are somehow changing what people are thinking about themselves. They're mostly post-colonial societies. They're societies where there's a lot of disputation about whose rights and who should be accepted and who should be blamed for this and that. And that may be getting to the young people either through guilt or disappointment, or yet having not yet figured out the right way how they can help to make a better world.
Mm. We know that the entire world, or let's say the past 5 to 10 years, but particularly, let's say, around when the pandemic broke out, we've been dealing with COVID, economic uncertainty, climate change, the rising cost of living, inflation. Would those things at all suggest why younger people particularly are feeling less secure, or let alone happy?
Well, it would if it were happening, because the rest of the world is subject to these same things, and it isn't happening there. So it has to be something that's special, and it can't be purely economic. I mean, the U.S. economy is doing just fine. The actual circumstances under which these people are living in terms of the average respondent's income and education and social connections and so on is not dramatically changed. So it's mainly up here.
I think we have some calls now. Let's go to Neil, who is joining us from Victoria. Neil, what do you have to say about how happy you are? Hello, Neil. Can you hear us? Oh, we're going to go back to Neil in just a second. But let's go back to John Helliwell. John, what is it about Scandinavia that keeps them at the top of the list regularly?
Well, it isn't just Scandinavia. At the big launch event here in Washington earlier today, we had ambassadors from Finland, which is top, and Iceland, which is always in the top 5, and Switzerland, which was once number 1. So they don't all have to be Scandinavian, but they're all societies with credible institutions that people trust. People trust each other. People look after each other, and they watch each other's backs and enjoy doing so. That sort of tight-knit community where the kids are happy walking to school on their own, and everybody looks after them. That's a kind of society people enjoy living in. They're much less materialistic in a sense. There's less feeling that you have to own things and do things differently from other people in order to feel happy with your lives. There's much more less comparative judgments going on. That helps for happiness.
I suppose that would a factor in that is that at least historically, a lot of those societies, particularly in Scandinavia, have been socially democratic. They have had a higher tax rate, but they've also had a relatively robust social service from early age to those who were older.
Yes, the ambassadors all emphasize that these are societies in which nobody falls out of the safety net, and they have widely available health and education at a quality for everybody, and that gives everybody an equal start. So they are all countries that rank highly in terms of people's freedom to make their key life decisions. As the Swiss ambassador pointed out, you don't need high tax rates to do that, but you have to, one way or another, have a system where people are going to look after each other, and they all emphasize the importance of trustworthy institutions. I emphasize the importance of feeling that other people are watching your back. It's not governments as much as, or it includes governments, are watching your back. So that if you dropped your wallet, it would be returned. And those are all countries where wallets almost universally come back.
You heard it here first, folks. If you drop your wallet in Scandinavia and those other countries, you might get it back, including Switzerland. Let's go back to
Canada too, by the way.
Yes, and in Canada.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
There's a famous experiment in Toronto where they dropped 20 wallets, and we have surveys asking how likely is your wallet to be returned. The expectation was about 25% chance to be returned. There were 20 wallets dropped, 16 of them were returned.
Those are pretty good odds. I think we have Neil back. He's in Victoria. Neil, what makes you happy?
Oh, well, on a bright sunny day in Victoria, usually we like to get outside and enjoy the beach. when we can, and we personally, I like to ride my one wheel all along the Dallas Road.
Sure. Go out to Beacon Hill Park and all that?
Yeah.
Nice. What do you make of the fact that Canada has slipped in those rankings, particularly for younger people?
Pardon me?
What do you make of the fact that Canada has slipped in the World Happiness Report rankings, especially for younger people?
I understand that it's an expensive place to live, and there's not a lot of jobs, and there's not a lot of and the rent here is high.
All right, Neil, appreciate your call. Thanks for sticking through the tech challenge. I think we have Ella, who is in Trail, joining us on the line. Hello, Ella. What makes you happy?
Hi. So, I guess my pets make me happy, but pretty much that's it right now. Because, the world's kind of dying, and that's kind of young people's problems, because most older people are going to be dead by that time.
Ella, can I ask you, between young person and old as we've defined it, where do you fall?
Well, I'm 13, so.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, very young. Is there anything that beyond your pets that gives you hope?
Well, it is a thing that the environment people are trying to make it better, but feel kind of sometimes like it's gone too far.
What would you like to see change?
I'd kind of just want people to understand it more and then actually do something about it.
So, for example, on the environment, you'd like to see perhaps stronger laws to cut down on pollution, that kind of thing?
Yeah, stuff like that.
Okay. Ella, appreciate your time, and thanks very much for calling. John Helliwell, what do you make of what you've heard so far from Ella and from Neil in Victoria?
Well, Ella's probably giving exactly the kind of evidence that's coming from others under 30. She's not quite old enough to be in the Gallup pool, which doesn't start till 14, but our chapter on young people has people in school starting at 12, and they're getting less happy as they go through that process. And we're not entirely sure why that's so age related, and it may be just they're hearing more negative news and feeling responsible about doing something about it. She mentioned the environment, and as a previous caller said, it may relate to housing and the growth of cities and competing for space in a variety of ways that people are still complaining, I think, rather than finding solutions.
Let's go to Basil in Vancouver. Basil, go ahead. What makes you happy?
Oh, thanks. Well, I'm an old geezer. When I was younger, I think I was a lot happier because I didn't see the fact that what's happening in the environment, we just enjoyed things and we weren't very careful about wasting stuff and using resources, and I think we did not help the young people for today, and I can see why they're happier than we were when we were younger. And unfortunately, and I can see why in Scandinavia maybe they're a lot happier there because their politicians are more concerned about what's happening, because that's the biggest issue of our day is the environmental crisis. And I can see politicians there being more concerned and doing things about it. Whereas here I can see young people not very enthused about what they see from our politicians. Well, for instance, Pierre Poilievre doesn't seem to be concerned about the environment at all. And he's got other things he's concerned about, but not the environment. And if he doesn't do anything or have concerns about the environment, then there isn't much future happiness for any of us, including our poor grandchildren and children. So
Basil, can I ask you, if you don't mind me jumping in, do you have children and grandchildren?
I, as a teacher, have many children and grandchildren. I used to teach, but none of my own, no.
And of those that you taught and teach, what did you what were the message you told them about either being happy or doing right by the world, whether it's environmentally, economically, socially?
Well, to first to feel good about themselves and love themselves, and from then they can start to have empathy for every living creature, for all our animal friends and birds and fish in the ocean, and be concerned about doing something for the ocean and doing something which brings a lot of happiness to people if they're doing things for other people or even all animal friends. And so that was all involved in environmental concerns and issues, because children need to see some kind of hope for the future. And when they look at our politicians, I can see why they're not too happy, because they're the ones that force the changes in our world to make it a better and a healthier place.
Mm-hmm. We appreciate your call. Thank you very much, Basil. John Helliwell, before we wrap up with you, final thoughts on what you've heard today from everyone from 13-year-olds to those who, quote, are old geezers.
Well, it's nice to hear from people that these personal relations they have are the warmest and best parts of their lives. Mm. That's true. And we also heard hints that they really were looking for and will be happier when they find good ways of cooperating with others to make a better world. And some of them are clearly frustrated with other people not doing their share. The happiness research says that life is really very local, and you can start immediately to change the social climate, which is all important, in your own school, in your own workplace, in your own neighborhood. And that often leads to local environmental efforts because they're a useful place to cleaning up the local park is one way of getting something for nothing in a way that it makes the park better and creates the kind of social linkages that make people happy. Doing things for others is critically important.
John Helliwell, the co-editor of the World Happiness Report and professor emeritus at UBC School of Economics. We really appreciate your time, John. Thanks very much for being here.
My pleasure.
And Barbara, stay on the line. We're going to get to you after the news. This is BC Today on CBC. We're on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our website, as well as YouTube and the app. Coming up, spring cleaning. Do you do it? If so, what do you do with the stuff you don't want? That's after this news update with Belle Puri.
Good afternoon. More charging stations for electric vehicles are coming to BC. The provincial government says it has $30 million to build another 500 terminals. Right now, there are 5,000 charging stations across the province. The BC government says a Vancouver-based company is developing a new chemical process to help lower the environmental impact of extracting critical minerals. PH7 Technologies will receive $850,000 from the Innovative Clean Energy Fund to conduct a pilot project. The company says its method uses less energy and water and produces a lower level of greenhouse gas emissions. Nelson police have arrested a man who allegedly attacked two teenage girls. Police say the Friday afternoon incident appears to have been random, unprovoked, and without any apparent motive. Now a suspect has been charged with one count of assault and released from custody. 11 daily temperature records were broken yesterday on the final day of winter. Lytton hit 22.4, breaking a record from 1947. Taking a look at today's weather along the north coast, clear with a high of 11. In the Peace region, a few flurries. They should be ending early this afternoon, then a mix of sun and cloud. For the central interior, a mix of sun and cloud as well. And in the southeast, the same with a high of 15 degrees. For the southern interior, mainly cloudy, a high of 15. And along the south coast, Greater Victoria, mainly cloudy and 11. In Metro Vancouver, a 60% chance of showers right about now, then mostly cloudy for the rest of the afternoon, a high of 12 degrees. And that's the CBC News from Vancouver.
Belle Puri, thanks very much. I have to ask, what makes you happy on World Happiness Day?
I'm pretty easy to please. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of things make me happy, but you know, like so many people, I'm concerned about that study that says young people are not happy. It's understandable, though, right? Because the world is a scary place. But
no kidding.
Maybe find happiness in some simple things like the daffodils I saw this morning while walking to transit.
Good. Or a nice steak sandwich. That's always good too, isn't it?
Or avocado on top.
But enough about what we ate today.
Hey, listen, even spring cleaning. I'm not suggesting that I'm going to do any, but when I do it, it makes me feel really good.
Makes you feel happy.
It does.
Get those endorphins going. And what do you do with the stuff that you don't want?
Oh, I have to get rid of it right away because, you take it out of the cupboards and out of the closets. And if it sits too long, sometimes, I don't know how this happens, it finds its way back into those cupboards and closets.
If you live with other people, maybe they take it, small gremlins that are just placing it back, not dusting it. Oh my goodness. Donations are always welcome too.
All right.
Thanks, Belle. Okay. Belle Puri in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back and thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Just before we get to the first full day of spring and spring cleaning, Barbara has been waiting patiently on the line from Vancouver. Barbara, when it comes to happiness, what makes you happy?
I would say what makes me most happy is my connections with others, my friends and my family. I don't mind sharing my age with you. I'm 55, and I didn't grow up in this age of all this social media, and I feel that the younger people, perhaps especially over the last 10 years, are struggling because of social media and everyone posting their best day and their best activity, and people are comparing themselves to others and finding themselves lacking for some reason. And I think that has a great deal to do with their mental state and emotional state, that I'm not doing what these people are doing, and so therefore I am not feeling as happy, not as fulfilled, because I'm comparing myself to others, and they're finding themselves lacking for some reason, and they're not. For instance, I ride the bus a lot, and everybody is plugged into a device.
Yep.
No one greets each other, says good morning anymore. There's no conversations going on. Everyone is in their own bubble. And I find my connections with my friends and how I feel about myself when I'm in the company of others, if they're good friends, you feel great about yourself and you're making those connections. And I just feel, I feel really sad for the young people today that are isolating themselves and just on a device all the time. I think it's really highly responsible for the unhappiness going on in the world.
Well, and if I can jump in, Barbara, if I may, what would be your advice to somebody perhaps who's younger than you in your life, maybe in that under 30 category? What would you tell them?
I'd say get out with some friends, get into nature. Being in nature is supposed to be so healing and great, a great source of happiness. Go for some walks. Leave your phones at home. Go to the beach. Enjoy the sunshine. Talk to each other. Say hello to someone you're passing by on the sidewalk. Don't be afraid and so self-contained. Put yourself out there a little bit. Stay in your comfort zone, but connect with people.
Yeah.
I mean, we're even losing the art of cursive writing because everything's done on a tablet, and I'd like to wish everybody to just be a little friendly, step out of your comfort zone, say hello, talk to your friends and family, and make those connections.
Right. Barbara, appreciate your time. I have one final question for you. Do you do spring cleaning?
Yes, I do.
And does that bring you joy? Does that make you happy?
Yeah, I do enjoy a clean house.
Okay.
I do enjoy a clean house. It does. I feel when your house is in order, your mind's in order. You're not as cluttered in your mind when your house is clean.
Very good advice, Barbara. Appreciate your time and your patience. That was great. Barbara joining us from Vancouver. Well, it is the first full day of spring, and to many that means spring cleaning. How's the segue for you there? It's also a time when we're looking at what we want to keep and perhaps what we want to let go of. not so easy sometimes. What are you holding on to physically? Are you trying to declutter? Give us a call with your struggles or tips. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 is our number in Metro Vancouver, pound 690 on your cell phone. Please be pulled over or hands-free if you're driving. Email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, and you can text us 236-330-2623. Here to walk us through the joys and potential pitfalls is Linda Chu, a professional organizer and founder of Out of Chaos. Linda, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, what did you make of what Barbara had to say there?
Well, there's a lot of truth to that, clear space, clear mind, as they say, because often we get so cluttered and we can't sort of see the floor for everything else. So it's really hard to sort of be mindful of all the items that you want to do. If you can't find things, then you're constantly searching.
Let's talk about people, for example, who may be downsizing. People of a certain vintage who are downsizing to smaller homes. What's involved with that whole process?
I always say for every decade an individual has lived in their home and they've acquired as a result of life, it probably will take about a week's worth of clearing that volume that you've amassed. It's a sign of a life well lived, absolutely, but now you're dealing with divesting yourself of all of those juicy morsels that you've collected over the years.
Or dusty morsels, as they may be. And so, I mean, that's a long time on a scale of, I guess on a numerical scale, it doesn't seem long, but these decades seem to fly faster.
The items themselves it's easy. It's called a Smith Wright and a shovel in a clear space. But I dare you, people will be dumpster diving if that's the case. It's the emotions that are attached to everything. Everything that you touch the moment you open up the photo album, there you go down the rabbit hole, and it's rejoicing, reclaiming all of the memories, and going through all of the joys in acquiring that item. That's the time that it takes. It's not about the stuff, it's about the emotions attached. And
what do people do if they have loved ones, children, and they're offering this stuff to them, and the kids say, I'm good?
I do a presentation called Your Kids Don't Want Your Stuff for that exact reason.
You hear that, Mom? No, I'm kidding.
Silverware that they don't want to polish. China that does not go into the dishwasher, the global figurines, all the tchotchkes on the mantle and things like that. Starter homes, a one-bedroom condo is 600 square feet. So there's no space for the china cabinet. Yes, it's oak. Yes, it's hand carved. Yes, it was, shipped in from Italy, et cetera, but people don't want it, or the family, they don't want it. So that's the issue.
Now, is it more the hang up that they don't want it just because they don't have the space, or that as well there may be an emotional attachment to that, like, oh, this is something else I have to deal with?
That as well. In terms of handing items down, it's also an aesthetic. Mom, that's not the style now.
Got it.
And then also the space. You don't have space in a 600 square foot condo for a 12-seater dining room set, plus buffet and hutch, et cetera, et cetera. And the tea wagon, on and on and on.
Tea wagon?
What tea?
I got hung up on the hutch.
So that's the tough thing about it is trying to reconcile with the fact that family and friends no longer want something that you've put it on a layaway plan.
Yes. Are you trying to declutter? Are you doing spring cleaning? Give us a call with your struggles or your tips across this great, big, beautiful province. 1-800-825-5950. You can call us 604-669-3733 in Metro Vancouver. bctoday@cbc.ca is our email. And if you want to text us, 236-330-2363. There are situations, Linda, where perhaps two people or more want the same thing. How do loved ones and family members navigate those potential waters?
I would recommend putting those in your will, if it's that important. Most people think, oh, I've got a Post-it note on it, or I wrote it on the back of the painting. That really doesn't fly, when
might not stand up in a court of law.
In terms of court of law,
yeah.
Exactly. So you really need to spend some time to put it down on paper to determine who gets what, to avoid, you hear families broken up from those arguments over a candy dish, and that's very real. With that,
let alone a beach house. Yeah.
Absolutely. So take the time to really go through the possessions with families and really find from them if they want it. You'll find many people don't want those items. So you spent your whole life collecting when it's like they don't really want the items at all, but it's really taking the time and having those conversations.
We have an email from Jim who is asking us, what do you do with old books that nobody wants, including old manuals and textbooks that are out of date? Do you throw them out or can they be recycled? Do you know, Linda?
Books cannot be recycled because of the gummy binding. Unless they're tearing out all the pages. So the hardbound books are sadly destined for the transfer station. Paperbacks and things like that, yes, depending on the gumminess of the binding with that. But most books can be, like everyday readers, can be donated. Any of your thrift stores, people who come, services that come to pick up at no cost. But textbooks is another issue. Textbooks is a sign of your blood, sweat, and tears over the times that you went to school, which is why it's so attached to it. But within 2 years, the information in that book is no longer relevant to students today studying that same subject. They're probably on the internet and they have a whole new set of textbooks that they're studying from.
Yeah,
so
grandma's
it's rubbish.
Yeah, grandma's world books are probably not holding up.
Encyclopedias is another.
Britannicas, yes, being sold door to door. When we think about larger items, we mentioned the hutches and the curios and all of that. Really big furniture. How can people deal with those challenges when, for example, somebody does want it, and you just have to negotiate where it can go?
So there's several ways. There's, of course, do you do a garage sale? Do you sell it on all of these online platforms right now, whether it's Marketplace, Kijiji, Craigslist, whatever it might be? But your reality is that depending on who is selling it, my mom's 90. So do I sell something and say, Mom, open the door to a stranger, take the money, give away the lamp? So maybe not. So you have to kind of sort of benchmark that decision. And it's about the time. Whose time are you going to take it? Whose cost are you going to ready that item for sale? Taking the photos, taking the measurements, answering all the correspondence for what? For $1, $2, a few cents, $20? There are a couple of furniture agencies, for lack of a better word, helping families in need, and Home Start are two that come to mind, that they do take furniture for a nominal pickup fee. Cost of gas is so expensive these days. So those are the two agencies, but no one else will take furniture for free.
Charlene is joining us on the line from Nelson. Charlene, are you spring cleaning, and what do you think about decluttering?
Hi. Well, I'm a feng shui interior designer, and it's kind of been part of my business over the years. I've taught classes, and there was a few things I mentioned that might help. And when I teach this class, I get people to kind of have 3 different piles. One is garbage or recycling. That's just gone. The second is gifting, like giving it to people. And I heard the woman talk about kids don't want your stuff. But, you know, there are things, I've had situations like last year, I cleaned out a whole pile of stuff after 30 years. And it's about offering it in a little party that people can come and take stuff. The third pile is the stuff you're not ready to let go yet. Put it in a bin, mark it clearly, and go back after a period of time, whether it's 2 months or 6 months, because guaranteed that pile will have itself again. Once you're not around things, then they tend to have the same value to you, and you're ready to let them go. And the one thing that I think is super important, especially for us baby boomers, is that as we let go of things, we have energy with everything we have. So we're actually adding to our energetic bank account. We're getting more vitalized, and we become happier and lighter.
Physically, mentally, emotionally?
All of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Charlene, I really appreciate your call. I saw Linda nodding along there. What do you make of what Charlene said?
You're absolutely right, because energy takes up space. You know, you don't see it, but it does take up space. And if you clutter up the space, there's no room for the good energy to move around. And Charlene mentioned something interesting, having a party. When we start out in life, we have a housewarming party.
Yes.
Invite people to bring items and gift you items. So think about it as a house cooling party. So now you're at the other end of the spectrum. spectrum, and now you're divesting yourself of a lifetime of memories. Have a party, reintegrate yourself with family and friends, but have a table designated or a room designated of items you don't want. Before they leave, they must take something away. And the stories with it. And the stories with it.
Nice. Allison is writing us some questions. I'm in the process of trying to get rid of stuff as we plan to downsize. I have a lot of old books that are no longer relevant, not candidates for secondhand stores. I hate thinking of them going into the garbage, but I understand they can't be recycled. Any suggestions? You mentioned this earlier, though.
Some books, depending on you can check in with community centers and also at seniors' residences. They all have libraries. And so you can donate the books to libraries. Prior to COVID, when there were the fitness centers and things, everyone was always thumbing through magazines and things like that. So you used to be able to donate to the fitness centers.
Yeah.
Because they're always needing somewhat current materials to flip through as you're on the treadmill.
Sure.
With that, so that may have resurrected itself. So you just have to be creative to check on places, maybe the doctor's offices, things like that. That might take some things.
Another good idea. Marie joins us from Abbotsford. Marie, what about spring cleaning for you and decluttering?
I was telling your producer that this topic makes me feel quite smug.
Oh, you're the one.
Yeah, I lived in a very small motorhome, and then I lived on a boat, and now I live in a small condo, so I have never collected clutter.
And
I just don't do it.
Really? Did you come to that discipline because of the limited space, or did you already have that in your makeup?
No, I have it in my makeup because when I was a child, we moved a lot, and we couldn't take a lot of stuff with us. So I got used to the idea that if I'm not going to use it, it doesn't come into my house.
Wow. Are there any items you always bring with you, Marie?
Some books from my childhood, some music, and so mostly I spend my spare money, so to speak, on entertainment and my pets. I have a bird and 2 cats.
And we talked about the emotional, actually the physical well-being and the feeling that people get when they're not cluttered. How do you feel when you're uncluttered?
Well, this is a little bit philosophical, I think, for this show, but I grew up in an environment where you couldn't afford to get attached to things because you never knew when you were going to have to leave it. So I don't have that gene, that attachment gene to stuff. So I don't have to agonize over whether I'm going to get rid of it or not, because I just do.
Marie, you are a sight better than a lot of people, and we appreciate your call. You don't have to feel smug. You've lived quite a life on a boat, in a condo, and a small motorhome. Thanks for calling. What do you make of what she said, Linda?
Marie is absolutely right when she talked about a mindset. We call spring cleaning, but I call it spring clearing. So we have an acronym, CLEAR, and the E is for evaluating. So it was being very, very clear about what your goal is. You have 2 choices. Door number 3 doesn't exist. You take your stuff, or you take your room. So do you want your space or do you want your stuff? So if you want your space, you have to clear your items. So it's what's important. Dinner around the table, to be able to invite people over, have room for friends, etc. So that is more beckoning to you than your stuff. But if you must hold on to your stuff, you are encroaching upon your space. So as I said, door number 3 doesn't exist. You have to be crystal clear as to what is your motive to start this project.
We want to get to another email. Claire writes, the best thing that happened to me was joining our local neighborhood Facebook Buy Nothing group. Been a member for 2 years. I've managed to divest myself of hundreds of items the family doesn't want, but other people, sometimes immigrants, sometimes people setting a new home, emotionally really love. It warms the heart to know that someone will get your things and love them as much as you did. Claire, thanks very much for writing that. In the time we have left, Linda, what are, you talked about the acronym CLEAR. What would be your other tips for spring clearing, as you call it?
I would recommend start small. The thought of doing the entire home in one day, you're just going to beat yourself silly with that. Start with small, literally set an alarm. Make a commitment, whether it's 15 minutes and half an hour. Buddy system always works. Start at my place, go back to your place. When the alarm goes off after that 20 minutes, maybe it's a drawer, maybe it's a handful of clothes that are hung up or a pocket, a corner in the room. But set a goal of 20 minutes. When the ringer goes off, it's telling you that you've made a commitment and you've succeeded. And celebrate the success. Don't go out and buy more stuff, but celebrate the success and go and enjoy yourself for a job well done.
How do you support others who are going through this process?
With compassion.
Because it must be frustrating in some cases, and where you think, oh, you could just get rid of that stuff. Come on, let's do it. And people are hesitant.
It's not my stuff. The reason why I can do it easily, because none of your stuff means anything to me, with no disrespect intended. But it's a world to the owner. So it's allowing them to tell the story, allowing them to revisit, but yet be strong enough to say, okay, let's yes or no, constantly pushing them through the process.
And making sure that you're respecting the fact that there's a distance there between them, right?
Yes, absolutely.
If people want to know more about Out of Chaos, where can they find out information?
Yeah, our website is www.outofchaos.ca.
Linda Chu, we really appreciate your time. A professional organizer and founder of Out of Chaos. Lots of good information and advice there if you are doing spring cleaning. That is it for our show. Thank you for calling in, emailing, and joining our discussion. You can always email us bctoday@cbc.ca.